Hello YouTubers and fellow hams. Well, I wanted to take a moment to give you an update on the Monster antenna plan. Just to recap, a while back I did a video on my idea for getting an antenna for lower frequencies like the 160 meter band or even the 630 meter band at 474 kilohertz into a smaller footprint. And the plan was to take 3 masts and spiral an end-fed half-wave antenna up between the masts, getting them into a smaller footprint. And I still want to build that. I was planning on building it when I got up here to Kingman, but there's a couple of things that came up, and we'll talk about that in a moment. As a precursor to that experiment, when I was in Quartzsite a little while ago, I put up an end-fed half-wave antenna for 160 meters. It's about 272 feet long, fed at the end with a 49-to-1 matching network, and I used the design that was popularized by Steve Ellington for the end-fed half-waves. There's, I guess, some debate about who invented it. I've been contacted by a couple of people in Europe that were complaining that Steve didn't invent it. I'm not going to get into that debate. I'm not interested in that particular debate. I just use the design that has been popularized and is readily available. So anyway, when I put that end-fed 160 meter antenna up down in Quartzsite, it worked really well on 160 meters, but in scanning it with the VNA, I discovered that it also had a very low SWR at 474 kilohertz. It seemed to be usable as an antenna on 630 meters. That was interesting. I was kind of surprised by that and a little excited by that, because it meant that it would be possible to put up much less wire and still get out on 630 meters, which is my goal. I want to get a nice long wave antenna that I can use on the 630 meter band that doesn't have to be 1,000 feet long or doesn't have to have the big bucket variometer to load it up. Something that's going to be maybe a little more efficient. So when I got up here to Kingman, I was looking at how to get masts together to build the big spiral, and I put the 160 meter end-fed back up to further experiment with it. I've got some pictures here, I think, of the antenna. It's going from near the ground at the RV up over the max gain systems mast. Across the field, and at the far end of the field, I have my MFJ mast up that the wire is going to, and then it drapes down to a tree off in the distance there. So the antenna itself is suspended about 25 feet off the ground, where it droops down. It droops down to about 25 feet off the ground. It's about 30 feet at the ends of the masts. And I scanned it again to confirm that what I saw down in Quartzsite was not a fluke, and sure enough, here is a VNA scan of the antenna at 474 kilohertz, and as you can see, we've got a nice low SWR, 1.5 to 1. I'm doing this from memory now, but the picture will be up on the screen so you can see the data. And an impedance that's roughly what you'd expect to see on a coaxial fed dipole, where you've got 74 ohms impedance at the center. And on a coaxial fed dipole, the dipole has 74 ohms of impedance in the center, the coax is 50 ohms. That little bit of mismatch is why you generally don't get the SWR down below 1.5 to 1 on a coaxial fed dipole. Maybe a little bit lower, but it never really gets down to 1 to 1 because you've got that inherent mismatch in impedances where the coax connects to the center of the dipole. And in this case, we're seeing about the same amount of mismatch in impedance, and so the SWR is right around 1.5 to 1. However, that's still fine for operating. So I've confirmed now that an end-fed half-wave wire for 160 meters is usable as an antenna on 630 meters if you want to get down into the long wave band and experiment there. that is one antenna possibility that doesn't require building a big bucket variometer. So that's interesting. Now, I wanted to make some 630 meter contacts here, so I started looking at the band, and it was really noisy. Well, I plugged in the AirSpy, the SDR, so I could look at the spectrum in a broad sense. And if we take a look at it here, you'll see that from about the bottom third of the AM broadcast band on down to almost DC, there's a massive amount of RF energy there. It's noise, it's hash noise, and it's just obliterating the entire long wave band. The whole 630 meter band is right in the middle of all this noise. So it's really not usable. What's that coming from? I think it's broadband over power lines. There are these power lines running right alongside the property here, and up at the road, about a half a mile up the road, is the very high voltage main lines coming through. And there, I've isolated it to the power lines. We turned off the main breaker, shut everything down in my RV and Tony's RV, and James, I think, was not really, he was running off solar at the time. But we killed the main breaker at the power box. I shut everything off in the RV, and there was no change at all to any of that noise at the lower end of the spectrum. So it's not coming from any localized source in the RV. It's definitely coming from the power lines. And it makes the long wave band completely unusable here in Kingman. So there's really no point to going further with that antenna experiment here, because I can't get on the air. It's just unusable with all that noise. Some people in comments are probably going to say, well, put a common mode choke in. That's not going to help. A common mode choke prevents localized noise from propagating up your feed line to the antenna and getting picked up by the antenna and brought back down to your radio. That's what a common mode choke does. That's not going to help in this case. In this case, there's a noise source on the power lines that is just strong, and it's obliterating that range of frequencies. Some people in comments are probably going to say, contact the power company and get them to fix it. Well, there's a couple of things there. One, I'm only going to be here for another 2 weeks at the most. It's getting hot here, and I have another problem that has cropped up. My air conditioning unit has failed. So I spent yesterday in 100-degree temperatures here in the RV with just a fan. And today is going to be the same, but then it's going to cool back down for a couple of weeks. So I've got a couple of weeks before I have to move. So I'm not going to be here long enough to really pursue that matter. And two, I don't think they're going to fix it. The problem is not a bad ground or a leaky transformer or some kind of equipment failure that they would fix. The problem is most likely, and I'm really only speculating that it's BPL, but it seems like it. If that's the case, it's a signal that they are inducing on their lines for a utility service, for something that they are doing. Communicating with their own equipment down the line is most likely what they're doing. It's something that they are doing on purpose, and they're not going to stop it just because one little squeaky voice says, hey, you're messing with my radios. It would be something that would require time and a lot of effort and a lot of pursuit to get fixed, even if it could be fixed. So I'm not going to go down that route. Like I say, I'm only going to be here a couple of more weeks. There's really no point. But I just wanted to give you an update, on what was going on. By the way, I did do some whisper testing on 630 meters, and here is the result. A couple of stations heard me quite a distance away. And if you're wondering, oh, there's only two stations that heard you, well, there's another factor there. There's not a lot of monitoring stations on whisper on 630 meters. There's just not a lot of them across the country. Very few people are actually doing that. So 2 of them that are heard me, and that was with 1/4 of a watt. 250 milliwatt whisper transmission was picked up by 2 stations on 630 meters. That tells me that the antenna is definitely radiating. If 1/4 watt at that low frequency can be heard that far away, even though it's whisper, it still was picked up. That tells me that the antenna is definitely radiating. It's doing its job. So I'm really confident in saying that an end-fed half-wave antenna on 160 meters looks like it's completely usable on 630 meters. So if you're thinking about playing around on that band down in long wave, and you're worried about antennas, if you have the space to put up a 270-foot end-fed half-wave wire, that should get you on the air. So that's the one conclusion I've come to that's positive and valuable at this point in time, which I didn't know, is that an end-fed half-wave on 160 is usable on 630 meters. Cool. I'm looking forward to trying to make some contacts on it when I get to an area that's not as noisy. So anyway, I just wanted to give you that update. I know a lot of people are probably waiting on that big antenna experiment and wondering when I'm going to do it. And this is why I'm not going to be doing it here in Kingman. That noise from the power lines just makes anything on that lower band just not doable. I can't receive anything. It's just completely obliterated by noise. So there's your update. I did also do some whisper broadcasting on 160 meters. Got a lot of hits. Here's a picture of that. And on 80 meters, a lot of hits. And on 40 meters. So the end-fed half-wave on 160 is a pretty good antenna up to about 40 meters. Above 40 meters in frequency, above 40 meters, it kind of fell off in performance. And there's probably a way of putting a loading coil in there at some point that will make it work better on the higher bands. But I didn't go that far with it. I was really only interested in the lower frequency bands in this case. What else? Yeah, I think that's about it. So that's just an update on that antenna project. When I get up to Oregon, later in the next month, later in June, there's going to be a lot of trees and a lot of space, and I'm kind of hoping that I can put the wire up there again. And if it's quiet up there, which it should be because it's a pretty remote location, I hope to be doing some 630 meter contacts, and I really want to fill a log page with 630 meter contacts, or at least put a few in the log. So that will be coming up, and if there's enough trees and they're close enough together, I might even attempt to put up the spiral design using the trees to see if that concept works. And I think it will, but anyway. So there you go, just an update for those people that are wondering what's going on with that antenna project. That's what's going on. And we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Also, if you're not already a subscriber, click to subscribe. Join us on the Facebook channel for discussion about the videos. And if you'd like to help support this channel, please click to support me on my Patreon page.